Yep. Hello, please take your seats. Okay. Welcome everybody to the much delayed and heavily anticipated audit committee meeting of Friday, October 11th, 2024. Special meeting, I should say. Supposed to be at 2 p.m., but we are actually getting started at 3:20 due to the delay from the board meeting. I'd like to ask the interpreter to explain how to access our interpretation services.
Thank you. Announcement from interpreter. To use the interpretation feature, please scroll down to the bottom of the Zoom screen where the meeting controls are, click on the interpretation icon, World, and select English as your language. If you're joining through the Zoom mobile app, like a cell phone or tablet, please press on the ellipsis, then Interpretation, and then choose your language. Finally, click on Mute Original Audio to not hear the original Spanish low in the background. Headsets are available for interpretation. If you are in the meeting room, please check out a headset from the receptionist in the lobby. Aviso por parte de la intérprete. Para hacer uso del servicio de interpretación, favor de desplazarse a la parte inferior de la pantalla del Zoom donde aparecen los controles. Haga clic en el icono de interpretación, globo terráqueo, y seleccione español o Spanish. Si está utilizando la aplicación móvil de Zoom desde su celular o tableta, presione los puntos suspensivos, luego interpretación y luego el idioma. Si no desea escuchar el audio original en inglés en el fondo, por favor seleccione Mute Original Audio, silenciar el audio original. También contamos con auriculares disponibles para el servicio de interpretación. Si se encuentra en la sala de la reunión, favor de pedir los auriculares a la recepcionista en el vestíbulo. Gracias. Thank you.
Thank you. Would you now please join me in the pledge? Ready to begin?
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Since we are getting started so late, I'm going to shift the agenda around a little bit. We are going to move items 2 and 3, the OIPA update and the consent calendar, to the end of the agenda, and depending upon time, may just not get to them this meeting. So we will start with item 1, then member comments, then move directly into the reports from there. For all of the items that we're starting with, due to, again, the late start, we will be taking 2 minutes of public speaker time for those particular items. Thanks for accommodating the Friday afternoon meeting, everyone. I know it's special, but we'll hear maybe next time more about what was going on and why we had to shift, since we probably won't have time this time, but it was for a very good reason, and I appreciate everybody's flexibility. With that, we will start with the non-agenda member public comments. Francesca, can you call any speakers, please?
Thank you, Chair. First speaker will be Michael Brando, who will be followed by Catherine Rhodes.
2.
All right. The Audit Committee, this dovetails with some comments that were made earlier. Audit Committee, we talk about audit and looking at practices and procedures of making sure things are done correctly. What's often not taken into account is the element of trust. And just today, earlier in our meeting, Mario, there was a gentleman here named Mark that directly asked Nora Vargas about her role with the United Nations. Andrew Bowen on X from KPBS immediately attacked that speaker, calling him racist and xenophobic. That's something that goes on at the County Board of Supervisors. When they hear things they don't like, they call them racist and xenophobic. Here's a quote to Andrew Bowen, to him. When all you have is a hammer, everything becomes a nail. SANDAG promotes the United Nations Sustainability Development Goals and advocates for binationalism. They prioritize globalism over sovereignty. To point that out is not xenophobia. And for you to ignore them doing so is equivalent to narrative, not journalism. I'll say that again. Narrative, not journalism. What does this have to do with audit? It goes back to trust. No matter how the procedures are perfected, how the practices are done, if there's not trust, if there's this massive disrespect to people who come here to speak by both the media and people like Nora Vargas and Tara Lawson-Remer, it creates distrust, and that's what's happened to this agency, and nothing will ever get better, no matter how hard you try, until you get clear on this. Thank you.
Our next speaker will be Catherine Rhodes, who will be followed by Truth.
Hello, this is Catherine Rhodes, and I'm talking about the bus stopover and SANDAG headquarters again. So anyway, when I talked to Mario like 2 weeks ago, he told me, or he mentioned that they're not going to actually do any fault investigations until you guys start like construction or something like that, or go to a different phase, instead of doing it during the due diligence phase when you actually buy the property. You should never buy property that has a fault on it. That's normal. A lot of times when I was working as a civil engineer, I would do fault investigations, find a fault, and then the people would say, well, we're not buying that property. That's not what you guys did. What you guys did is you just did some, preliminary investigation, and it didn't give you any information or anything like that. It just presumed that there was no active faulting when there is a presumption of active faulting. But here in SANDAG, you guys think that the presumption is there's no active faulting and you have to have evidence of active faulting, when it's the opposite of what around. You have to assume active faulting, and you need evidence that there is no active faulting before you buy the property. So anyway, $44 million. And it seems like, as somebody says, you have no lessons learned, because on September 27th, 2024, the executive officer's delegated actions say they put an offer of $11.65 million for 2 more properties for that site on A, B, State, and Union, without a fault investigation. So what I'm saying is, before you spend $11.65 million, please do a fault investigation on the whole entire block. The part of the blocks that you already spent, that you already bought money on, that probably has a fault, and the other sites that you can't be bothered to do before you put in an offer. Thank you.
Your time has expired. Thank you. Our next speaker will be Truth, and Truth will be followed by Blair Beekman on Zoom. Blair will be our last speaker on this item.
You know, with the usual 60 seconds, I'm used to, I could talk super fast. I could probably get like 5 speeches in. All right, good to see some of you guys in person. Finally, I was informed that there's yet another who did what when conundrum to be figured out. The Zito beer riddle, what brand? It can't be Bud Light that let everybody down. Tecate or Modelo, that'd be faux regional solidarity. Miller, only if you're a Bowling for Soup fan like me. I don't think Duff, because I don't think Zito's a Simpsons fan. Corona, that'd be the wrong year. Maybe Blue Moon for all the rare times SANDAG collects on a toll for the 125, or for all the rare times SANDAG tells the truth. Maybe Blue Ribbon, because that'd be the best SANDAG could hope for to earn for all the decades of corruption and psychosis. Or do the SANDAG junk sodas count as free beer? But I really figured out the answer to the puzzle. Arnold Palmer equals Zito's version of beer. But all that really matters, did it go well with Regent's Pizza? I'm convinced Zito only buys to justify eating more pizza, which I, of course, approve of. What I don't approve of is Zito having only one shirt. Did nobody give him the new SANDAG 2024 Bike Anywhere Day shirt? And even that got me. Now, I thought of this earlier because we heard 67 million was uncollected on the 125, and Jacktivist claimed, oh, no money's lost. I think the audit committee could probably fact check that one. But think about it, 67 million, that's about what, 4 bike lanes max? And now to talk about something random, because I didn't have any extra 35 seconds planned in my mind. Let's just talk about free trade, because in Imperial Beach, they talked about the negative externalities of free trade. And SANDAG is definitely in that business of free trade. So I ask, what positive effects did it have on the average American? When the General Agreement on Trade and Tariffs was passed in 1994, all the politicians promised great benefit because they're liars. They only meant benefit for themselves and their public-private business partnerships, also known as fascism. And so when you have that OME toll coming up, it's the same concept. There's going to be negative consequences for Americans, but the big corporations are going to profit. Thank you.
Our final speaker will be Blair Beekman. You can go ahead.
Hi, Blair Beekman. I wasn't sure there was going to be an audit meeting, so I spoke at the previous non-agenda public comment on important facts I wanted to bring here. Quick reminder, good luck in how we're talking about housing issues at this time at SANDAG. Thank you. Good luck in talking about new arena ideas and goals that were really impressive, how to build a flexibility to the future of the arena process overall. That actually was surprising to local SANDAG persons. They needed to kind of collect their collective breath about it and collect their thoughts, how to better understand what possibly could be some really progressive ideas. Hopefully you can add that to the mix of these housing ideas. And like I said, the ideas of mixed income housing, the flexibility and choices it offers for our future, I think can be amazing. I'm not positive, but I hope you can learn how to explain that. It has to be a patient conversation with community. I hope you can really want to practice that. We're afraid to at this time. Good luck how we can learn to do it. I think it can develop something really, really important and meaningful for our future. With that all said, very much of a thank you for previous public comment about concepts of trust. The city of San Diego, we're going through some pretty odd difficulties with the future of the public meeting process. And the people are tired of certain people who are kind of dominating the public meeting process. I think that's being noted by those public speakers. I hope they're making changes to how they think and work. I know I am, and I see a path that I can much less reduce my time and space, yet still contribute to the process. This has to be a two-way street. Those reporters doing that sort of reporting, they have to learn to tone that down and realize people have real serious questions that Nora has to answer and mediate with the public about. It has to be.
Thank you. Your time has expired, Chair. That concludes the public comments.
Thank you. And I think I can honestly say that Mr. Beekman and I had one common thought today, as we were both not sure if there'd be an audit committee meeting, but we are now here. And thanks, everybody. And I'm going to dive right into the meat of the meeting and start with item number 4 reports, which is the compilation of the external audit recommendations and OIPA annual audit investigations and recommendations. I did want to start with an initial comment because it was after talking with the independent performance auditor, we decided to include the 2 of the items in here, actually 1 item, but it's the June Audit Committee ACFR follow-up and the correction to that memo as well. People may recall or may not that when the ACFR was presented in July, I had asked for management to come back and give an update in September on what they were doing to make sure that the process would be better in the upcoming audits. And since we ended up not having a September meeting due to certain conflicts, they did provided a written response, and that's what that was, is they provided that written response. I reviewed it. I've met with Dawn and Courtney, and we've talked about it. We have a current plan because I wasn't feeling like all the answers were complete to the point I wanted them, that we're going to be doing quarterly follow-ups starting in November just to review how this is going. And I wanted to put that out there if the audit committee itself would prefer to come back. And, it'll clearly come back as soon as we have the next ACFR, but if they wanted another topic before then, please reach out to me and just say, hey, I'd like to put this on this agenda and find out and discuss it more. Otherwise, just know we're doing these offline meetings just to make sure that try to do our best to ensure that the future audits will go better than the last one did with respect to the ACFR. So just wanted to put that comment out there first and then turn it over to Courtney and her team for her update.
Thank you, Chair Zito. I'm Courtney Ruby. I'm the independent performance auditor, and we are starting with the audit and investigation recommendation and corrective action plan status report. I am joined today with Emily Mullen, and she is the Associate Administrative Analyst, and she'll be joining me in the presentation. So just a little background, Board Policy 39 3.1.9 does require the Audit Committee to monitor the implementation of corrective action identified in audit and investigative reports and inform the board when corrective action is insufficient or untimely. Additionally, OIPA's annual audit work plan, which is authorized by the audit committee and the board The work plan goal number 4 is the development and monitoring of corrective action plans, and that is to ensure OIPA's recommendations are clear, timely, and responsive, and implemented by management expeditiously. I'm going to turn it over to Emily.
Thanks, Courtney. Good afternoon, everyone. Just a note on our process, this report includes updates. Typically, it would be from a fiscal year because we did not have a meeting in September and we're presenting to you in October. We went ahead and extended the date we were looking at implementation for until August 30th. So any actions that were scheduled to be implemented on or before August 30th, 2024 are included in this report. There is a noted exception, and that is any corrective actions that had previously been reported to the audit committee or the board of directors as implemented, we also rolled into this report. We verify all of the information on our investigation recommendations and our audit recommendations, either by a documentation review or by conducting testing. Have to point it over here.
Yeah, there you go.
Sorry if I blinded anyone. I'll try to be brief because I know we're pressed for time. So I won't read every single definition, but just to make a note, we only conclude that a recommendation has been implemented once we conduct testing. So management can tell us that they've implemented. We won't mark it as such in our report until we've done the testing or reviewed the documentation. And then we do have a dropped item in this report, and that either means that the IPA herself has deemed that it is circumstances have rendered it unnecessary, or the recommendation itself was outside of the original audit scope. And then as far as our date definitions, the planned implementation date refers to the date that management or the responsible party initially proposed implementing the recommendation by. Some of those were revised, so the report does contain some revised implementation dates. And then we're going to roll right into OIPA audit recommendations. I won't read all of these because they're quite a mouthful, but we had 5 audits that were included in this fiscal year's report. They include the contracts audit part 1 and 2, which were quite lengthy. I'm going to turn it over to Courtney briefly just to give a update on ERP and CMS and how those relate to this recommendation follow-up report.
Yep. So during the confirmation of corrective actions for the contracts audit part 1 and part 2, we were notified by management that the enterprise resource planning system, the ERP system, is unable to fully support certain complex functions required by the agency's procurement program. So management has decided to rely on the prior CMS program. That's the contracts management system and the ERP system together to support the agency's procurement functions. Management informed OIPA that the CMS will manage solicitation, procurement, and contract award activities, while the contract module within the ERP will act as a system of record for budgeting and accounting and regarding the activities to contract awards, despite it being less efficient for procurement tasks. And we found that when we tested it, that it is inefficient. So management intends to develop a work plan to transition back to the CMS, and that work plan should be presented approximately by June 30th, 2025. Due to that change, when you look at your report, you will see that we tested the recommendations, the corrective action plans in the ERP system, because that's where the corrections were made, even though it's inefficient. And then once it transfers back to the CMS, we will retest it. And that is noted in both my opening letter in the report, as well as when you look at the recommendation in OIPA's comments, it will identify which ones we're going to retest. And with that, I will hand it back over to Emily.
Just a brief summary. Of the 5 audits, there were 120 total recommendations that we looked at. 38 were implemented this period, 7 we dropped, and then that leaves 75 outstanding. We are going to continue tracking them into the next fiscal year. And this is a breakdown by audit. This is also included in the report. You'll note that the contracts audit part 1 and 2 have quite a few recommendations that are still pending, and that is in part due to what Courtney just spoke about, the ERP CMS implementation that is going to be taking a bit longer. So those have been pushed out. The vendors audit is completely implemented, so we will no longer be tracking those. And then for the purchase card and the travel and business related reimbursement, we have about 3 or 4 each that we're going to be looking at rolling into next year. And then during testing, we did find 9 total recommendations that were considered overdue and require attention. Of those 9, management notified us that 6 were going to require additional time to complete. So in the report that you've received, it will say that it is either pending or started, and then there's a revised implementation date that's been provided by management. We'll keep tracking those into this coming fiscal year. Also, we had 3 recommendations that upon testing revealed they were not completely functional, or there were controls that were missing, and they are going to also require further corrective action. So again, I'll try to be brief, but the first audit that has still pending recommendations was the employee travel and business related reimbursement audit. As you can see, these have revised implementation dates. They are pertaining mostly to new policy that's going to be written, and I believe Mario is working with his team on that. There was guidance provided by the interim CEO, and they're incorporating some of those changes as we speak. The purchase card audit, again, the bottom 3 recommendations, they are working on new policy. They have new implementation dates. We'll be checking back with management on those in the coming months. The first recommendation was relating to recurring charges on purchase cards. While there was a control that was put in place, unfortunately, there was a recurring charge from OIPA that came up over the summer. So we do need some more robust controls to ensure that that does not continue. We did take care of that one though. For the contracts audit part 1, these 2 came up during testing. They pertain to the ERP system and some of the changes that were required through this audit. The ERP is not fully meeting those requirements, so management will be working on those as well. And with that, I will turn it back to Courtney for the investigation recommendations.
Thank you. So we conducted one investigation, which I'm sure most people are aware of in this room, that was released on March 2024 for the state Route 125 tolling operations. We had 10 recommendations, 2 were implemented, 4 were started, and 4 were not started. When we look at the recommendations, I'm just going to touch on the ones that the ones that are implemented, I'm not going to touch on. The first one is independent assessment of the finance department. This is the responsibility of my department, and we will be issuing an RFP this month for that. The next one is a reconciliation between CAPS, and that's the roadside system, and E10's BOS system. We wanted daily reconciliation there to ensure accurate transmission and posting of customer account data. So per management, multiple efforts are underway to reconcile, but that it took longer. The reconciliation is taking longer, and they anticipate they have a revised implementation date in December for this one. The next one is a policy matter. So that will be going with the policy to the board. And this was the policy about the multi-million-dollar projects when they're failing, to make sure that the board and the audit committee are notified. And both the audit committee and OIPA had this recommendation forwarded on to management. The last one on this list is requested. The audit committee wanted to include the sole source procurement in OIPA's work plan, and it has been, and we have initiated that audit. The one on top that has not been started yet is about daily monitoring to ensure all systems are operating together. This isn't just about the roadside to the BOS. This is really looking at all the systems, and management wanted more time on this to make sure that they capture all the information necessary there. The next one under there is the evaluation of the Deloitte and A to B DMV hold functionality in the new implementation. And so this is it does expedite revenue collection. We had requested that that management go to Deloitte and see if this could occur sooner. They did. They went to Deloitte and asked if they could move it from phase 4 to 1. And Deloitte said that it was not feasible at that time. So we still are requesting that it be considered to be either moved into phase 2 or 3 because it does impact revenue. The last one here is a repeat of the previous recommendation to recommend to reconcile between the CAP system and the BOS system. One of the recommendations fell off the PowerPoint, and I do apologize for that. And it was the last recommendation, recommendation 10 in the investigation. And that was for SANDAG to establish a process to address the customer concerns related to the past account balances. So they have started it, management has started this, but when we go out and with the investigations, we are doing follow-up on a quarterly basis, but we will be reporting out to you on a semi-annual basis. So we'll see what the progress is when we report out next. And that concludes the investigation recommendations. I'm going to hand it back over to Emily to do the external audit recommendations.
Thanks, Courtney. So for our external, this will go much faster. What we do each year is compile all of the external audits that were completed and the ones that had outstanding recommendations from prior years. And then we reach out to management in the different SANDAG departments to get updates on those recommendations. Similarly to our internal, we went ahead and extended that to August 30th this year. So that's what is contained in this report. And as part of our work plan, these are included along with investigations and internal. However, we don't do testing or verification for external audits. All we do is compile the information that management has given to us. So that's important to note. We had 5 external audits. The main one is the ACFR for fiscal year 2023. There were also 3 of the triennial Transnet performance audits, and then the ITALK extension activities report from the last fiscal year. There were 51 external audit recommendations outstanding from the prior year, and then 3 additional external audits were completed last year, which added a total of 33 new recommendations. 25 were said to be implemented, 1 we dropped, and so there will be 58 that we track into next year. And then this is a summary of those 5 audits that we looked at. The vast majority have either been implemented or are at least started or partly implemented. And most of these are under the purview of ITALK. And then we are almost done. This is our last slide.
So when we look ahead, we will revisit all recommendations affected by the ERP and CMS system changes, as we noted before. And we will be meeting with management in the coming months to collaborate on process improvements. So nobody likes process improvements better than OIPA. We want to go through this recommendation follow-up and see how we can improve and talk to management about timing. So we'll be doing that. And then, as I stated before, we will update you on the investigation recommendations on a biannual basis. And that concludes our presentation.
It's mine. There you go.
Thanks. I'll use mic number 1 for a little bit. Thank you for that great update. Francesca, do we have any public comment on this item?
Chair, we do not have any public comment on this item.
No public comment. Then we will move into member comments. Do we have any committee members? Ms. Wong Nickerson.
So first of all, I want to thank OIPA office. You've done an amazing job and compiling all the corrective actions plan status report. I mean, it was very clear, very comprehensive. I really appreciate that. I mean, so it's all together. And I can tell you all have been really busy and working really hard. A lot of really great reports here. I do have some questions. It's not very clear to me. So for example, the report regarding the procurement and contract, audit, part 1, part 2. I thank you for pointing out, a new very significant issue has surfaced, right? That the ERP system actually is not able to fully support the complex function for the procurement. I remember many months ago when the new ERP system was presented, it was branded as this will be the solutions to solve the procurement and contract, audit problems. And I think a lot of hopes were, put on that system. But now I think it really begs the question, is the ERP system that being implemented, going to really solve the problems that OIPA have identified before? And I don't know if that's like a management question or OIPA that maybe is it appropriate to step back and say, do we have the right solution to solve the problem, or are we just trying to piece things together right now? Because it sounds like SANDAG plans to go back to the old CMS system, right? So
I'll address it from OIPA's standpoint, and then I'll turn it over to the CEO. So from OIPA's standpoint, it did create a wrinkle, absolutely. And I think, and that OIPA and management worked really well to figure out, first of all, just what I talked about, that you have two systems here. It was a change in what we anticipated. I think that management was concerned at first with it being inefficient. My team was like, no, we can test it. It may be inefficient, but we can go in there and make sure that it met the corrective action plan. So it does meet it, but it's inefficient, right? So that comes back to, they have met what the recommendation states, but they recognize it, which is what they brought to us, that this isn't the right solution, so that they're moving to the CMS. I know that's the broader question you have, and that I will hand it over to the CEO to address that issue. But the ones that we've noted, there's several of them we did note that they're implemented, right? But we need to look when it transitions back over to CMS.
Okay, so I'm actually going to do almost what I was going to do in the introduction for Don. And let me start from answering your question. And very similar to item 5 that will be presented later on, this agency needs to get better in defining its systems requirements and lining up functionality in systems that get acquired. That due diligence wasn't done to 100% of what we would have liked with the ERP. So also, in fairness, also in that statement, that there is a psyche of changing to a new system that employees resist. So that's been a challenge, but definitely, I don't think we did as an agency due diligence in looking at all the process that were required to be taken into consideration with an administrative system and with this ERP. So there is going to be room for improvement. It's what we have is functioning, but there are going to have to be some workarounds. And so that, to answer your question, we are evaluating that. I think it's going to work, but it's going to require additional efforts from our side, or modulars and more training. That's, in that aspect, is what I have to answer there. But also in a broader sense, and to expand a little bit, it's we need to, I really appreciate OIPA's work, but now we as a team need to get to their part. And we should not be just responding to recommendations. Yes, we agree, or no, we don't agree. We need to be looking at the functionality and how we're going to implement those items. And that is going to take us a little bit more time, because we need to be planning ahead for success in all the recommendations that are coming. So I really appreciate Courtney's team. OIPA has actually facilitated a little bit on my job, because they have identified the roadmap to success. But good example I'll give you, the hospitality policy. Technically, it was done. Did I accept it? No, because this agency needs stronger guardrails. So I sent it back to the team and I said, we're gonna need stronger guardrails. When do we bring issues to the board? Well, we don't need a policy of when do you bring issues. We need, how do we manage risk, both enterprise risk and project management risk? So that requires additional work of how we're going to implement risk management. And yes, one of the outcomes of risk management is when you float up major issues. So, and I can give you several examples of that, but I think we need to get out as staff and me as the CEO, we need to get out of the just responding to check the box up to a point and really start putting our minds into where the board wants us, where the public wants us, where the audit committee, and where it makes sense as a public agency. So going back to the ERP, we need to really do our homework, but we weren't, this workaround that we came out, it was to be able to continue functioning as an agency. So it's a shortcut right now to be able to keep functioning, but we do need to do more diligence. So you are going to see that we will be potentially delaying some implementations because it's not just about, oh, we send a response and it's an okay response. No, how we're going to format ourselves as an agency to regain the trust of the public. And how are we really going to become the elite with those guardrails on becoming a public agency? I expanded, and that was actually my introduction. So whenever you guys are finished with comments, I'll let Dawn do her responses.
Yeah, one second. Did you have more, Ms. Wagner-Harrison?
To make CMS and ERP work together, but you will evaluate if the new ERP, is it the right tool or something else may need to be to replace that. So I'm glad I agree with you, just because Courtney said, oh, okay, now it meets these, what audit finding found, but if there's a lot of workarounds, very inefficient, it might not be the right solution long-term, right? Yeah, so that's my very first question. The second one, kind of similar, when we go to the 125, same thing, right? The Deloitte systems, again, doesn't do the financial reporting. So that's the original problem that we had. So again, I guess I'm wondering if the management
That's, I think, the next agenda item. So
I should.
we'll wait till the next agenda item to talk about with the 125. Thanks.
To also bring up another thing, I actually really feel for the staff at SANDAG. It seems like they're going through a lot of things, right? They have to do the audit, they have to do the new system implementations, clear audit findings, and all of these things don't seem to be going very smoothly. Can you comment on, do you have enough staffing and the right people to do the work, or what else do you need to get all these things accomplished?
That's a great question. I think from a fiscal responsibility point of view, our numbers should be correct. We should not be growing. Now, should we be repurposing some positions that are vacant to be repurposed to the actual classifications or focus of work? Yes, we do. So that's where we need to go and reclassify and repurpose to address some of our issues, but also to deal with our mid and long-term vision. Now, that's where we are. Employees are catching up, and it's extremely stressful for the team playing catch up. I have told the team this is probably going to keep happening for the remainder of this year until the next summer, but our goal is to be in parallel or ahead of the curve in becoming better. So it is a growing pain getting out of this little hole that we're in. But from a staffing perspective, we're doing an evaluation of repurposing vacant positions and see how we could go about it and putting people in the right places or reorganizing so we can address some of these issues better.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to make sure that you will feel comfortable if you need more resources. Now, it's easy for me to say I'm not the board, I don't have to approve the budget, but I do think it's important, like if you need extra resources to get this agency to where they need to be, I hope you feel comfortable asking for that. Yeah.
We will come back to ask you for support.
Okay.
I just lost my other mic. That's sitting in Ms. Dorsey's.
All right, well, I'm Pickney Forest.
Yeah, thanks.
I just want to sort of note, because I know we're going to sort of have a deeper dive and a deeper conversation regarding the 125, but I do want to sort of note that I think Agnes was looking at my notes because I had similar questions and concerns. And what I will say is the question that I had was the ERP a new system that was intended to sort of handle some of those procurement items, and it didn't? And the answer to that is yes. So then what I'm seeing from a larger issue, from a wider perspective, is that, one, I think we're all very clear that it's wasteful and time consuming to sort of continue to go down these roads where we're getting systems and they're not meeting the intended needs. But then two, there's actually a pattern of SANDAG getting systems that are not meeting the intended needs. So what I want to sort of do, or want to sort of place publicly, is to sort of begin to sort of place in all of our minds the idea that it may be necessary for SANDAG to sort of look and revisit the idea of making sure that there is an enterprise-wide systems development or change management process that's not just specific to a particular project, like the ERP system, you're going to look into it, you're going to try to see what's necessary to see how these two systems can work, but from a larger perspective where there is an actual team and an IT specialist on board, someone that's a subject matter expert, some place where there's an actual process and procedure for making sure that considerations are actually taken before these items are purchased. So I know we're going to have a larger conversation later, but I think it was kind of well placed to kind of have the conversation here to sort of say that we're seeing a pattern of behavior, for a lack of better words, but a pattern where there are systems that are being procured that aren't necessarily meeting the needs.
Anything else? That's it. And David, did you have some to add?
Yes.
Great.
First of all, I want to make sure that the contract management system, whatever is used, is following all the procedures that are necessary to make sure that we are processing contracts correctly. And what I'm worried about is it may be inefficient, but it works and is auditable, versus it's efficient and things will slip through the cracks like we've had with contracts. It's extremely important that we make sure that the procedures are correct, and that, again, that they are being followed rather than the system of record, rather than the system. That's the most important thing. And I want to step back and make two general comments. One, I made this to the board when ITALK came and presented their audit. And my belief is that, Mario, you are not staffed up enough to be able to handle all this. The audit staff doesn't have enough resources. You don't have enough resources to be able to handle all the needs to make sure that this agency is following through with all the policies and procedures necessary to make this an effective organization. Right now, it does its job, shall we say, but in order for it to pass muster with ITOG, the public, I believe it needs a whole lot more staff to be able to handle that. And that brings up my next general comment, which is, what is SANDAG? And ultimately, SANDAG is a planning agency. It's a project management, construction management agency, and it's a PR agency. And it really is not in the business of digging dirt. And that's a different agency that digs dirt. We're an agency that actually manage the digging of dirt, and we don't do it ourselves because we outsource so much. And because of that, contract management and project management become so much more important than actually getting the projects done, because the projects getting done are being outsourced to somebody else. And we as an agency need to be that agency that ensures the projects are being done appropriately, efficiently, effectively, and auditably, shall we say. And that is not what seems to be happening. It seems to be, let's go get this project done, full speed ahead. And if we screw up, we don't do the requirements right, we don't do whatever, it'll come out in the wash. And that has to change. And again, going back to my second comment, you're going to need more staff to do that because there's a whole lot more oversight. And that's the problem. People want to see stuff done. They don't want to have oversight done. And that is what the agency has to become, is an oversight agency as much as possible.
Thanks, David. Yeah, I think you would agree, being in the software field, that efficiency is not always possible with enterprise-wide tools. And while we should certainly strive for efficiency, governments by nature are not the most efficient beings. And so the more important things are the accuracy, the auditability, the actually being able to enforce the process. And so as long as our tools can do that, we're at least in a pretty decent space. And I concur with what the other sentiments from my fellow committee members. I did have a few things I want to touch base on, though, which is, some of these are just comments. This first one's just a comment for management, which is, I noticed that there's a lot of items in these reviews that are due on December 31st of this year that aren't started. I don't know if that was looked at closely, but hopefully in the future updates, if things are likely going to need to be moved, we can be warned ahead of time, because right now there are probably a dozen things in there that are marked for the end of the year that aren't even started yet on these reviews. So I'd appreciate, make sure we take a good look at that and start getting ahead of it and figure out where they're actually going to land. One of the things, should we decide to, which hopefully we'll forward this onto the board, one of the things that I would actually like to see added by OIPA is, just for anything that's marked as dropped in the OIPA comments area, mark it as why it was dropped. I'd actually like that to get done prior to this coming to the board, if possible, just so they can see why it was decided to be dropped. I appreciate the definition. That's helpful, but it doesn't explain why each one was not decided to be continued with. And a question I have that maybe you can clarify, that there were several items marked as implemented, but then in the OIPA comments, they say, well, we're going to have to revisit these because they're going back to CMS. How is that being tracked, given they're currently marked as implemented? How are we going to track that?
We have it in the comments, so we're tracking. Emily has a master spreadsheet that she has everything on, so we're tracking it. But also in the comments, we have the same phrase on all those recommendations.
Keep stealing Mario's mics. I would maybe recommend that, I don't know if it's needed now, but in the future, maybe we'd have like a superscript 1 on implemented, and then down below just say, these are going to have to be revisited in CMS, so you can just easily see in that column which ones we're going to have to go back and look at again. And then similarly, I don't know if we can make a blanket statement. There was a number of items that were marked as partially implemented items. And then there was some comments in there, but I couldn't tell if the expectation was that they will eventually get to fully implement it, or if this was only partially implemented because there was some potential inherent disagreement between management and OIPA of whether or not the job was done. So can we say that at this point that all the partially implemented items, we do intend to get to fully implemented at this point? Is that fair?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. And then the last one about that particular item, on the finance department one, since, we're just about to kick that off. I mean, clearly, in particular with respect to the next item on the agenda, there's been a lot of discussion that maybe controls and processes in the finance department aren't where they need to be. And I just want to make sure that we've had the conversations that they're ready for this external investigation, or maybe the way that the contractor, the statement of work's being written will say, it's not just to go tell them that they're doing something wrong, but it's to help them to get it right. Maybe you can clarify what the intent of this will be for that finance department one, the audit, the review of the finance department.
It is absolutely to be a useful tool. It's not just to evaluate, assess whether they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. And the scope of work, the initial scope of work was shared with both Kimberly and Don. So we've had that dialogue as well, because it needs to be a document that helps move the organization forward.
That's awesome. So that's perfect. Just to make sure, I want to make sure that it's not just a review, that it's helpful overall to the department, as long as, again, you feel like you can maintain your independence in that whole process while still being helpful. Then the last item or question I had, and again, this is mostly for management, but on the external updates, when I was looking at that, I would appreciate it in future years if we could get a report on anything that's been done in the past year. So if I look at the external updates, some of these ones that are in progress or TBD have been on there since 2018. That's 6 years ago. And I can't tell if none of them have had any work in the last year, or some of them had some work. So if we could just get an indication of, in the future reports, of this is where it's at, and this is what we got, this is what we accomplished in the last year as well when we do those updates, so we can see what's actually moving and what isn't moving with respect to those recommendations. If that's okay.
We can do that.
Okay,
And to
great.
answer the mayor, I think in future meetings, we'll come in and present the new org charts and how we're reorganizing and repurposing what I said. We have focused first on the project management that you just mentioned. So you will be very well surprised on how we're organizing our delivery department. I think the next big shakeup is going to be of how we either create or focus on a controller type of office or responsibility that owns a lot of the recommendations, but project manages them in order to provide adequate responses, and can have the management muscle to push through the agency those responses. But more than the responses, like I said, that we can push the coordinated conversation, so there are strategic elements that we're implementing to get better, not just to respond.
Awesome. So those are my comments. Yes, Ms. Bowen Nickerson.
Couple of things, follow-up comments. One that actually, I wonder if it's possible for OIPER, for the one recommendations that are not implemented or partially identify the higher risk one. Maybe that will help management try to focus on those, because there's still quite a few items, right? So maybe identify the high risk one, and then they can focus on those first. The rest can be handled later. So that's comment number one. Comment number two, I do think, I want to follow up on, what she said earlier, the structure for these kind of large system implementation. I do think the governance structure is really important, right? I'm sure a lot of you are used to seeing, you usually have an executive sponsor committee that they give strategic direction, but they also own the outcome of the project, right? They ultimately accountable. So make it very clear what's the role of this executive committee role. And then you usually have a steering committee do more operational direction, for the committee, and then you have working groups. So I would very much like to see, structure similar to that kind of structure, and then clearly define the responsibilities and roles. I think that would be really helpful. Yeah.
Anything else? Yeah, I mean, I think there's been a couple of great comments from both Ms. Pickney Force and all three of you actually, that maybe when we move into the next item, we can formulate those as recommendations that get tracked as well. So just be thinking about that as part of the next item. Is there anything else on this particular item that people wanted to mention? Otherwise, I'd entertain a motion to send this to the board with the change that I requested about the dropped items having OIPA comments.
So moved.
So moved by Drucker
Second.
and a second by Wong Nickerson. Please vote. One for yes, two for no, three for abstain. The numbers. Motion passed unanimously with member Dorsey absent. Awesome. So with that, we will now move on to item number 5, which is the investigation report about the 125 investigations, as well as a whistleblower investigation report. And I will turn this over to Courtney to introduce.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just waiting for it to be teed up. Good. Okay. I'm going to move through this very quickly in the interest of time. So I'm hopeful that everybody has had a chance to read the report. So I am presenting both the companion investigation, which was requested by the board and the audit committee, and to when E10 significant performance issues were known, by whom, and what actions occurred. And then a whistleblower investigation that was brought to our office in May on SANDAG's new tolling back office system implementation. I'm joined today with both Lloyd Carter, the Deputy Performance Auditor, and Doug DePete, who is a Principal Performance Auditor, as well as a Whistleblower Hotline Manager. And Doug and I just did the investigation work on these two. So we know in December that there were concerns brought forward, which initiated the report that we released in March of 2024 on the SR 125. The investigation did reveal that ETAN's financial reporting could not be relied upon, and that it was headed for trouble from the beginning, and SANDAG executives failed to address the situation in a timely manner, including informing the board of directors. So soon after the March release, as I stated earlier, audit committee and the board requested us to conduct a follow-up investigation, and we received a whistleblower. With the companion, this is the follow-up investigation. The objectives were to determine who on the executive team and the board of directors knew of the significant performance struggles by ETAN that were referenced in the original investigation, when they became aware of the ETAN significant issues, what they knew, and what actions were taken, if any, to address the issues. We found that OIPA did not identify any board members that were notified prior to the closed session in late 2023 regarding ETAN's performance. All members of the executive team were aware of ETAN's back office system performance issues, and the executive team had knowledge of the significance of ETAN's performance issues in June of 2022. The last finding is that due to poor management, the critical time needed to issue a back office system, RFP, to replace ETAN was lost. And instead, SANDAG embarked on 4 different paths, some simultaneously, to address the operational crisis caused by ETAN's inability to meet critical contractual requirements. These paths demonstrated a wasteful use of public resources and a lack of transparency, accountability, and internal coordination. The result was a hastily executed sole source contract award to Deloitte. I'll go through each finding quickly. The first one we stated the board did not know. The second one, all members knew. However, all executive team members knew, except it does differ based on their role, experience, and proximity to the SR 125 operations, as well as the overall direction from the former CEO. The former CEO, when he was asked in December 8th, just to demonstrate that he did feel that this was in his full authority to address the situation, he started off, "You hired your staff to do their job, and we were doing our jobs." And as the last statement of the quote says, he felt that small operational issues weren't to be brought to the board. When the former interim CEO, Colleen Clemenson, was asked at the board meeting after the first investigation was released in relation to who knew, she said, who knew about it and how were the discussions and then who made the decision? Ultimately, that was the CEO that made the decision. The CEO had a meeting with the CEO of ETAN and they made an agreement that they were going to continue to work on it. She also stated that SANDAG has a culture to just believe if we keep working on it, that it'll get better. Finding 3, we know that in June of 2022, the executive team had knowledge of the significant issues. On June 23rd, Fagan debriefed to the executive team members what was in the BOS risk assessment. Those slides were emailed out to the executive team. And on June 30th, there was a discussion with the executive team members present, as well as senior management. And the invite stated, Hassan is requesting this meeting to discuss SR 125, specifically with E10 going forward. Please make this meeting a priority. On July 8th, Fagan released their report. And on July 14th, the former CEO met with the former CFO and Deputy CEO Major, and former Deputy CEO Clemenson was out of town. As I stated earlier, the finding was due to poor management, that critical time was lost to issue the RFP, and instead 4 paths emerged. The 4 paths, as you see on this slide, some of them occurring simultaneously. I'm going to go through each path. The first was OME's BOS solicitation. So initially there was a clause in ETAN's contract that they could provide the BOS for OME. However, after seeing the significance of ETAN's issues, it was decided that that option would not be exercised. So then the OME team decided they had 2 other options. They could have a CTOC agency process OME's tolling transactions, or they could procure a separate BOS for OME. By January of 2023, they determined that the CTOC agency processing was not an option and that they were going to move forward with a BOS for OME only. Path 2 are activities leading up to the sole source contract award to Deloitte that occurred from December 2022 to January 2024. So from December 2022 to May 2023, approximately 5 vendors were talked to in relation to the back office system. From September 23 to October 23, SANDAG worked exclusively with Deloitte and A to B. On October 3rd, this is when Deloitte presents the SANDAG Deloitte Tolling Solution Executive Proposal to the executive team and RTS and IT directors. On October 13th, that is highlighted in red because that is the date. This is the first time that the board is notified in closed session of the significant performance issues. On November 6th, a sole source award is signed for Deloitte for $450,000 to evaluate whether ETAN's BOS data is suitable for migration to a new BOS. And on January 12th, SANDAG's board publicly authorizes a $28 million sole source contract to Deloitte and A to B for the regional BOS. Occurring at the same time, from February 2023 through September 2023, SANDAG staff works on a regional BOS support services. So they were seeking to get consulting services to assist with these items in the scope, supporting a SANDAG project manager in the overall planning, development, and supporting the project, working on the regional solicitation package, regional system requirements, developing strategic planning documents. On July 12, 2023, it had reached the point where the Contracts and Procurement Office held a Mobility Technology ITS on-call kickoff meeting in preparation for 3 mini solicitations. One of those solicitations was for the consulting services for the new regional back office system solicitation. And on September 27th, the Director of Regional Transportation Services directed them to hold off on releasing this BOS RFP. Fagan remained involved in some fashion over from September 2022 to October 2023. In August of 2022, a new director of regional transportation services was onboarded. By the end of September, Fagan briefed the new director of RTS on the next steps, and it included simultaneously beginning to procure a new back office system. On November 8th, Fagan sent the director an email with an alternative approach to shorten the process to an RFQ. In May 4th, 2023, at SANDAG's request, Fagan sent the director draft proposals for 2 tasks, and one of those tasks was a transition to a next generation back office system. On June 8th, the contract amendment was executed for Fagan to do the work, and October 2nd, the transition plan was published. Fagan envisioned, the plan included that Fagan envisioned a transition timeline of approximately 2 years, 6 years to produce a new BOS RFP, and then the rest of the time for a notice to proceed to project acceptance. So in conclusion, the executive team knew in June 2022, the board did not know until October 13th. The activities related to procuring a new vendor system were occurring from the end of 2022 throughout 23 without the board's knowledge, and multiple past squandered critical time to issue a public procurement, and it undermined the trust of the board and the public. The result was a hastily executed sole source contract award to Deloitte. In May, we received a whistleblower complaint, and we then did our preliminary work. And what we know is that on January 12th, 24, that as stated before, the board of directors authorized a sole source procurement to Deloitte and A to B. But before that even occurred, on October 2nd, 2023, Fagan provided their SANDAG transition plan to SANDAG. And it was received by both the former CFO as well as the director of RTS, and it included a section on the procurement of a new system that stated the BOS RFP should be written to emphasize detailed, in-depth demonstrations showing actual system capabilities as opposed to brief written descriptions on how the system works. It should address the defects previously noted in the requirements during Fagan's operational assessment and rework the overly cumbersome business requirements document. And it should ensure that new operational and technical requirements provide the ability to conduct auditing, screen views, query searches, and reports on both individual and bulk transactions. We've highlighted 3 points, but there was actually 6 points in this section in the report. Our objectives were to determine, based on what the whistleblower stated, whether SANDAG's financial reporting needs were taken into consideration during the selection of Deloitte and A to B for the replacement of E10's BOS, and if A to B's Move Beyond system can provide the requisite financial reporting. We found that the finance department's financial reporting needs were not considered during the procurement process. The system requirements were not developed, for the replacement and therefore are absent in the contract with Deloitte, and that A to B and Move Beyond software does not include an internal general ledger or financial accounting system, and that SANDAG in April 2024 discovered a critical component needed to facilitate the integration between the new BOS and SANDAG's new ERP system, and they found that it was missing. So I'll briefly go through each finding. The first one was that the finance department's financial reporting needs were not considered. When we reached out to management in July to confirm whether finance needs were considered during the procurement process, management responded that staff were unable to find any information or documentation related to how finance's needs were considered in the selection of A to B and Deloitte. SANDAG's consideration of various vendors to provide a new tolling system was limited to approximately 5 vendors, and the documentation around those visits and those vendors is very limited. And there is no written analysis as to why Deloitte and A to B were selected for a $28.7 million contract over the other vendors interviewed, except for a 1-page sole source justification. So just to remind everyone, one of the primary reasons SANDAG needed to procure a new BOS was that E10's BOS financial reporting could not be relied upon. So we found in finding 2 that system requirements were not developed for the replacement BOS, therefore it was absent in the contract. SANDAG instead defined outcomes it wanted the system to produce. It's unclear why SANDAG believed that defining outcomes was a viable option. The contract outcome with Deloitte states that SANDAG will provide the reports needed for alignment with the off-the-shelf system. So it literally states SANDAG will provide this item. Thus, the outcome is not defined. Instead, it is an action item for SANDAG to define that is not defined. This is contrary to Fagan's recommendations that I mentioned earlier. Oh, just want to state that regardless of whether it is an off-the-shelf software procurement or software is being developed, system requirements are the norm and not the exception. When we spoke to Fagan's tolling implementation expert, they stated they'd never seen a project with an outcomes matrix and that a typical project would include system requirements and take 3 to 4 years to implement. SANDAG's prior 2016 back office system RFP took 3 years to prepare. It included outside consultants and over 2,000 requirements. So Deloitte & Touche proposed a 7-month implementation to go live. SANDAG at a minimum would not have been able to conclude that a 7-month implementation schedule was achievable. It is unclear why Deloitte and A2B with their industry and system implementation expertise would have offered such a short implementation schedule without a thorough vetting of system requirements. SANDAG and the external contractors appear to have not engaged in the due diligence for a complex system implementation. Finding 3, A2B move beyond software does not include an internal general ledger like ETAN's BOS does. When we asked management stated back to us the move beyond system is a tolling commercial back office system and not designed to be an accounting system. According to the director of RTS, the A2B back office software did not contain a financial accounting solution. They stated A2B doesn't have a financial package. They connect to whatever your financial system is, or we could have told them to get one, but we said, no, you have to use our ERP. So the finance department working on the implementation believed that the new BOS system would be like the current E10 BOS system and included general ledger accounting system embedded. This is not the case. The new BOS system does not include that. And staff and consultants have gone on for months in discussions and disagreements involved in all levels in relation to what the system does and does not provide and how whether the ERP provides a system and various levels of that. We know that the financial reporting capabilities, according to Deloitte's documentation, are to occur in phase 2 and that they will be integrated between the new BOS and SANDAG's ERP. And in the initial phase 1 7-month period, that the process will be performed manually by the finance department. And the finance department has informed us that the manual process will be more laborious than what they are currently doing to get financial statements out of E10's BOS. The finance staff is overtaxed. They're doing E10's workarounds, annual audit requests and reports, new system implementation, and now a new organization-wide implementation for the ERP system is also difficult. This is an example of ineffective internal project management and resource planning contributing to employee burnout and low morale. The director of RTS also stated that SANDAG's former deputy CEO and former CIO stated that SANDAG's ERP system would be able to handle the financial transactions for the new tolling back office system. Finding 4, however, found that in April of 2024, SANDAG discovered that a critical component was missing to facilitate the integration of the new BOS with SANDAG's ERP system. The BOS financial data must interface with SANDAG's new ERP to prepare SANDAG's financial statements. The standard industry document defining how a system interfaces with another system is an interface control document, or what is called an ICD. An ICD describes all data inputs going into and data outputs coming out of a system. There is no pre-existing ICD for the ERP system. The contract for Deloitte stated that the system must adhere to ICD provided by SANDAG. In April 2022, as I stated before, SANDAG informed Deloitte, and Deloitte responded with an email and a letter that said, SANDAG has informed us that there is no pre-existing ICD for the ERP system. Given that SANDAG plans to create an untested ICD for this purpose, we need to extend the project schedule to make room for risk mitigation testing and revisions to this ICD on both the Move Beyond and the Tyler ERP systems. So in conclusion, SANDAG embarked on an expedited and uncoordinated process to replace ETAN's back office system. Best procurement and project management practices were not utilized, and lessons learned from the prior ETAN BOS implementation were ignored. The goal was to fix it quickly without laying the groundwork for success as recommended by Fagan. Creating system requirements with subject matter experts and stakeholders would have flushed out risk and failure points in the project. While A to B is an off-the-shelf commercial tolling system, a significant piece SANDAG failed to consider was the amount of planning which needed to occur on the front end to successfully implement A to B's Move Beyond BOS, even though SANDAG's vendor Fagan had warned significant planning was needed. We have 6 recommendations. The first is to have clearly defined senior management roles, responsibilities, and expectations, including when there's special project assignments, and that the CEO should hold senior managers accountable to such. 2, require key senior leadership positions have the requisite project management skills to effectively manage large-scale internal projects. 3, revise sole source policies and procedures for IT to procure sole source awards except for demonstrated proprietary, compatibility, or unique functionality issues only. An IT system implementation would not qualify. 4, require system requirements be developed for IT system solutions, and all stakeholders are formally included in the process, and that this requisite time must be included in project planning. 5, multi-million-dollar contract awards must include sufficient pre-award analysis to demonstrate a vendor has been formally evaluated against SANDAG's project requirements. SANDAG's project requirements must be fully defined before an award is determined. And last, formal post-evaluations of all multi-million-dollar projects should be conducted. Lessons learned documented, and corrective action plans for future projects prepared and presented to the CEO. This report will be presented to the Board of Directors on October 25th, 2024 for discussion and possible action after it is heard here today. SANDAG's management should provide a written response to OIPA within the next 2 weeks, and OIPA will publicly report on the status of the recommendations to the Audit Committee and the Board of Directors. Questions?
Thank you for that. First, we'll start. Francesca, are there any public speakers?
We do not have any public speakers on this item.
We have no public speakers. Okay, great. Thanks. Well, not great, but helpful from a time management perspective. But regardless, I'll start out with a couple of comments. First, as we go through this, clearly go ahead and make your comments, give your thoughts. But, some of the other things that would be useful is there are the recommendations. So if there are any thoughts about the recommendations, or as I alluded to earlier, other recommendations that we should be forwarding, please have those in mind as well. I'll just start off with just one comment that, having been on the audit committee for almost 4 years now, I think this to me is this is the most damning report I've seen so far. It's just really scary to think that we went out to procure a system to fix and address the issues with the existing system, and those requirements weren't even defined or analyzed. And I'm almost at a loss of words for that, but I'm sure we'll have plenty of continued discussion on that particular item as well. But before I go into more comments, I will open it up to the other members. If any, I guess, Ms. Pigney Forrest, I'll start with you first this time, if you'd like.
I'm processing all of that. I think what kind of comes to mind, I was jotting down some notes, and some of what I'm going to sort of say is already reflected in recommendations, but just to just to kind of ground myself, I guess, ground the public, ground us in the conversation, it seems as though there are three kind of consistent issues. The system's not meeting any needs, key stakeholders not being notified of items in a timely manner, and then three, the lack of accountability or unclear accountability roles and responsibilities. So in my head, there are four sort of fundamental areas for consideration going forward. Again, some of which are reflected in the OIPA's report. So one, it would be the governance structure and sort of having something in place to review at an enterprise-wide level any new projects coming in. So that is even kind of piggybacking off of Agnes's comments of, you have your executive committee, you have your steering committee, you have your working group, et cetera. So having something along those lines. Two, required notification to boards, audit committees, management of issues of high importance. That criteria, however that's decided, that's up to management to decide. It could be high-risk areas, it could be areas of high finance, areas that we've already previously identified, but having something in place that requires immediate or timely notification when items like that come about. Three, the frequency of review and reports regarding large system implementation. So if that's, the steering committee, the working groups coming to whatever board body is established to basically sort of show, there's been feasibility studies, there's proof of evaluations and needs, the timelines, things of that sort. And then fourth, just making sure that there's very clear roles and responsibilities. Six Sigma comes to mind regarding the RACI, kind of knowing who's responsible, accountable, consulted, and informed. So those were sort of like the three main issues, and then sort of like the four fundamental items that I think need to be parsed out and considered going forward. And again, of which some have already been reflected in the OIPA's report. So those are my comments.
Great, thanks. Yeah, I've used the RACI model before and think it can be very effective as well. So maybe specifically calling out a model like that in the recommendation could be useful. It doesn't have to be that one, but some sort of actual known process model for Six Sigma or RACI. Ms. Wong Nickerson, do you have some comments?
Yeah, can someone clarify? I was under the impression Deloitte and A2B are looking at a regional back office system, not just addressing 125. Is that accurate?
The contract is going to address the tolling of the I-15 and the 125.
But not the Otay Mesa.
No. And I can tell you, based on board direction, definitely this system will not be doing it. We will be following the appropriate procedures. We are currently putting in what's called the B diagram, systems requirements, putting out that, and we will be putting a request for proposal to basically see if a private vendor or some of the companies that are already doing tolling, even government entities, will come in with some proposals. But definitely the Deloitte, this system will not be doing the Otay Mesa East. They can bid on their systems requirement and then we can evaluate it. But that definitely, this will not be a for an entire regional system based on board direction.
Thanks. Yeah. I'm sorry to jump in quickly on that though. And I don't want to, Otay Mesa East is not the topic of conversation here, but I do want to know when at some point to have the understanding. I mean, we just had a report that said the consultant said that developing the requirements and rolling out a solution is a 3 to 4 year task. So does that mean Otay Mesa East is not running for 3 to 4 years? And if not, how are you going to cut that implementation short relative to the standard timeline to get it done on time? And I don't know that we can answer that right now.
No,
but
I can answer.
Okay, thanks.
First of all, when it was being presented, something's, clarity. I ran Otay Mesa East for 14 or 16 years, that project, until I became chief deputy 3 years ago. So the systems requirement has already been in process. So that eating up on those 3 years is already happening. A back office system, a systems requirement was and is being evaluated currently. What are the systems requirements? That doesn't mean that you're putting out a procurement. You're figuring out what are the processes. You will not be able until just recently, a couple months from now, really define it exactly, because the negotiations with the Mexican government had just finalized in determining the buckets and the percentages. So that's going to go in the systems requirements. Now, one thing that was mentioned here, that it was determined that the California, the Tolling Association, I frankly don't even know who did that evaluation, because I wasn't aware of that. Maybe here they did, if they could do it or check it out, but the OME team never really looked into that, to my knowledge. So, but to have said that, is I would say that we're already far ahead in eating up into those 3 years, and actually we're already thinking as Caltrans SANDAG on how to put out the procurement or request for proposals for that system. So we are following the systems requirements and all that. We will need to tweak it based on the current negotiations that we had with Mexico of how we're going to segregate the money and how is it going to be identified. So I hope that answers the question.
And thanks for the clarification, because I wanted to, understand the Deloitte and the A2B contract, what's the impact? Because my impression before was 125 was a problem, 15 was fine, I was told, I think before, but we didn't have issue with the 15, right? And then I was worried that, if Deloitte going to have a problematic system now, have an even bigger scope, then, it reminded me of the Dr. Seuss book, A Cat in the Hat, right? The two kids that starting with a small problem and the problem becoming bigger and bigger in a time of fixing it. So I just want to have a better understanding of the scope.
And to put it to the audit committee's perspective, I want to put it that the OME is a big task coming up, but also our regional plan, clearly the current one in the proposed 2025 is banking quite a bit, banking meaning that it's relying on the use of managed lanes substantially. So definitely a back office system is going to be required, not just for OME, but for the entire managed lane systems. So we need to get it right.
Yes, totally agreed. Not sure of the process, how to make sure that it will be.
We will not be following this process, I can guarantee you.
Good, good. And then another thing, let's see. I assume, similar question that I asked before for the ERP. I assume management will now reevaluate the Deloitte and A2B system, like what they have to offer. Is that the right solution for 15 and 125? I mean, I don't know what the future of 125, but 15 will be around, right? So,
So I don't know how much I can speak about this, because we have just had a closed door session with the board, but we have gotten clear direction on a short-term basis and foreseeing a longer-term basis. So I think that the plan, if let's say there's no optimal plan, it will start looking into that long-term vision of getting something that it will serve the different needs with whoever or who in plural or singular can provide us those services, and following the industry standards to get those type of systems, meaning all the identifying systems requirements, having the due diligence. On my presentation 2 weeks ago to the board, I kept saying something that is very important, and this is not, it's not just fixed on the transit agency, it's on everybody. I kept saying that we need to consider when we're delivering a project, our partners. Let it be the transit agency, MTS, North County Transit, Caltrans. But even internally, we need to consider are clients. So finance is a client, toll operations is a client, and OME is Mexico's going to be a client. So we're going to have to consider everybody who's going to be involved and get those requirements and then accommodate to them. That's industry standard.
All right, well, thanks. And I just want to clarify, 15, we don't have an issue with it right now, right?
15, we have the same issue as the 125. It's the same system, and therefore it's being operated. It has a 75-25 split, meaning that 75% of the revenues or operations are handled 75% from the 125 and 25% from a volume perspective is handled in the I-15, give or take, but it's in the same bucket.
Okay, thank
Anything you'd like to add, David?
First of all, I think, Shawnee, you hit the nail on the head on this. This is extremely disheartening. When this was all presented, the idea was Deloitte was going to solve it all. And obviously, the staff did not do their due diligence on that and have set the requirements up. The other major disheartening problem is no ICD for the Taylor ERP. And that should have been a major requirement. Any type of ERP system should automatically have that type of functionality so that you can take and enter in bulk types of transactions through an ICD, and that not having it is a major problem. The recommendations, et cetera, the findings, I agree with them all, and Mario got a tough job.
It will send a response. On some of them, I may go back and tweak a little bit and talk to OIPA. Again, looking at that long-term vision. In general, we're in agreement, and I think nothing's good out of this, but you will be surprised or glad when we present the structures. A lot of the recommendations are already being put in place one way or another through our reorganization. So it is a heavy lift in front of us, but like I tell the team, any long journey starts with the first and second step. So here we go.
Any other comments? Yeah, and thanks again to the team for digging into this and approaching it with a objective eye and just making sure that we're getting the data out there. To get ahead of what might be some discussion, I just want to ask a question, which is, with an investigation like this, with an outcome like this, where there are multiple paths and very clearly sort of almost a predefined path ahead of time, what seems to be is, from your perspective, did you find anything suspicious that indicates that other investigations should be triggered at this point?
We did not.
Okay, so your analysis is that we are just dealing with incompetence, for lack of a better term, and lack of process controls.
Yes.
Okay, thanks. And I just want to make sure that's out there because, this kind of stuff will get talked about. And from my perspective, as I started out with the conversation, I find it very disappointing that when this came up before the board and I was asking very pointed questions, we've confirmed this new system will fix the issues. And yes, we're sure. And now it doesn't. We need to make sure that there's ways that doesn't happen again, that we actually have done that and have that diligence to answer truthfully and upfront. I guess one of the questions I had, given what's found in this one, I don't know if Mario, your team is ready to talk about this, able to talk about it, or answer is, given what was exposed in the report, does it even make sense to move to the Deloitte system until that interface definition is implemented and tested? Because it's clearly going to be more work and more effort to do that than the current system, and probably make it less likely that we're going to be successful in our future audits if we do, because you're going to have two messy systems that they're going to be working through as opposed to one. So is your team able to answer that? Are you?
I think what I can tell you is we had a very robust conversation with the board and they have
Okay.
given us direction.
Direction, okay. So it's being considered, and that's what you can tell me. That concern, okay. The, let's see, so other than that, I don't know that, and I had a conversation with the independent performance about it. I don't know that I'm totally aligned around that there should be this singling out of sole source policies for IT. I actually think IT is one of the areas where it makes the most sense to do source policies in times, but I would actually think that maybe as we go through with the board discussion, that there can be a revision of that recommendation, or just a separate recommendation saying that we just need to be, for at least the foreseeable future, very concrete about sole source policies in general, and not just IT, but just saying, and really digging into those. And I think it's our responsibility as a governing body to say, for these guys to bring it forth. And I guarantee you, if I'm up there, the questions I'll ask will be a lot harder. And I think having a policy that is representative of what the expectations are will be very useful. And I know we have the audit coming up, which I'm sure will have its own set of recommendations.
I had the same, that's the one I was gonna, I won't say push back, by define on intelligent transportation systems, enterprise systems, IT systems, and not, because it does put in a hard wall around it, and it does preclude a lot of things that gets done in industry. So that was one of the ones I want to have a discussion with Courtney and her team of how we could frame it in a better way.
Great. I look forward to having that
Yeah.
conversation.
So I don't know. And then I look at this and the finding that you have that 2 days before it went to the board, they were still trying to get information out of the finance department, and that wasn't even mentioned to the board. I mean, there just has to be ways as we go through implementing these recommendations that stuff like that gets fixed. And this combined with the first item, which there were no recommendations. And again, just in transparency, when I talked about it with Courtney, she said, well, we just sort of combined all the recommendations into the second one. But I do think that that it's a good refresher that that some of the existing policies that we have out there should be followed, and I mean, and reinforced. And there were, or not policies, but recommendations. And I'm trying to think of which one that was. But anyway, I've lost it in my notes. But regardless, we need to really firm that up. Are there any other comments or thoughts? Otherwise, entertain a motion to move this on to the board.
So moved.
I have a motion by Drucker,
A second.
second by Pinckney Forrest. Please vote. 1 yes, 2 no, 3 abstain. So we have moved that onto the board. And again, thanks to everybody for participating and engaging on that. With that, we're going to move on to item number 6, which is the annual performance review for the independent performance auditor. I don't know about others, but it's just freakish to me to think we're already 11 months for Courtney. So congratulations for surviving the 11 months. And I appreciate you being here. There's no presentation here. I just want to kind of give an overview of how we manage this, and then look for a partner in crime. So generally what we do is set up a subcommittee, and that subcommittee will go off and conduct a survey of certain individuals that is done online, and collect the feedback and organize the feedback, and then also work with HR to come up with a salary recommendation based upon what's going on in the industry and what else has been done in SANDAG over the past year. And then, so we will do that. In the next meeting, we would come back and have Courtney present her self-evaluation of accomplishments for the year, and then that'll go into the subcommittee. And then in the December meeting, we would come back as a subcommittee and present all of the information together with the survey results and the recommendation from the subcommittee. So that's generally how the process works. Before I take any comment, are there any public speakers on this item? Francesca.
We do have one public speaker, Blair Beekman. You can go ahead.
Okay, please go ahead.
Hi, Blair Beekman. Thank you for these yearly audit reports, and thank you for reporting out on Otay Mesa issues on the previous item. I thought that was interesting addition to the process. Thank you.
Okay. With that, thank you for the comment. With that, are there any volunteer? I will offer up myself, being I'm the longest serving member here at this point, and we have a new IPA, so I'll offer up myself. I didn't participate last year. Ms. Wong Nickerson did, and I appreciate her service, but are there any volunteers for my partner in crime for this process? And nobody's.
Don't look at me, because the reason I would suggest you don't look at me is this is in December will be my last meeting. So it would be best to have somebody that has some continuity to do this rather than me. So
I don't know, Ms. Pickney Force, if you think you have the time. It's not a huge time intensive thing, but it will require some offline work to review comments and have a few conversations with me. Are you interested and willing to do that?
We can have a conversation. I just want to make sure there's no conflicts of interest or anything of that sort.
Oh, okay. So a conversation, but I mean, as far as you're okay at least starting out being a member of the subcommittee, and then we can take a look at it from there. Okay, so we'll do that. I don't know if that actually requires a motion.
It does formally require a motion for the committee to confirm that we
Okay.
have created a subcommittee.
Okay, so I would so move that it's myself and Ms. Pickney Force as a subcommittee. Do we have a second? Second by Wong Nickerson, and please vote. That motion passes unanimously with member Dorsey absent. Great. With that, since we're at the bewitching hour, which I mentioned, which is 5 p.m., and I appreciate everybody helping us get through there, I'm going to push the other two items to the next meeting, the minutes and the IP update. Our next meeting is scheduled for Friday, November 1st, 2024 at 9 a.m. I do want to also mention now, as you can tell from the meeting today, and give everybody a heads up, that our meeting in December, because of the crunch schedule of December and a holiday month, is also on the same day as a board meeting in the afternoon. It's currently showing 1 p.m. I can guarantee you I will move that to 2 p.m. For that day as well. And just to give you a heads up for that as well. So with that, we're adjourned. Everybody have a great weekend and go Padres.